Greetings, everybody. It's Jim with another scenario report for Starship Troopers from Avalon Hill. And I got a quick question for you. How many turns do you think it took me to get totally wiped out on one side in scenario three, the invasion of Skinny Five? Tell you what, let's ask Mr. Owl.
Let's find out. One, two, three, three.
And that's about how long it took. I totally got wiped out on one side for the skinnies. There's a reason for that. We're going to go over here in a little bit. And the only reason I really want to go over any kind of spoiler on the set strategy that I use is because this game actually gets quite chaotic. I talked about chaos before, but we're going to definitely get into that because you definitely want to learn the spoiler so you can have some kind of a fight because you don't want to go through all the rigmarole that I did for this scenario and then have end like really super prematurely. I mean, I like learning curves, that's all well and good, but this one probably you'd be do good to watch this video. So today we're going to be going over with you the scenario report for Starship Troopers Scenario 3, the invasion of Skinny 5. So here we have the skinny setup. Don't worry about the Marines right now. They're just there to be there. But this is the setup for the skinny. So let's go over a little bit of what the scenario is about. Now, it resembles a lot of the first scenario with a few important differences. The first main difference is now the Marines have to just find all the installations, period. There's not a point-based system. They either find them all or they lose. They got 12 turns to do it. Of course, the skinnies are a little bit more better equipped this time. They can place installations on the rough hexes, which cost the Marines 3 movement points to enter each hex. So that was a big difference there. But basically, the skinnies can also win if they inflict 25 or more heavy wounds, wounded in actions, or killed in actions results. And that's, of course, a really hard thing to do. But I managed to get a few of them in there, so maybe not impossible. But basically, let's look at the setup. Now, as you can see, if you remember scenario one, I chose to spread everything out to make it harder for the Marines to make it to one end to the other, to make their search a little bit, make them go around a little bit more, which kind of worked for scenario one to a degree. This one, it does not work whatsoever, even with being able to put the installations in the rough hexes, and we'll go on and show why. Now, one thing that I forgot to do is the Marines do win if at the end of any turn there is not a skinny in a spaceport or a city hex. And I forgot to put some skinnies in there, but I remedy that later. And we'll go over that why you don't need too many to actually be in there at all, because the Marines, their movement is like they need 3 points of movement to just move in the city, while the skinnies only need half a movement because it's their home turf, right? So they end up looking like this Keystone Cops chasing these guys down all the time. So you don't have to overestimate how many skinnies you need in the spaceport. All right. So let's go over now something very important, which is drift. Okay. So this is how the Marines enter the scenario. All right. So, and also I should have mentioned, if we look at the chart real quick here, you notice that the skinnies have some more heavy firepower, much like the bugs did in the last scenario. So very important to point out. So they've got they still have to force the Marines to spread out, but spread out indeed they shall. No doubt about it. So let's look at the drop diagram here. All right, so here we have the Marines all set up and ready to drop, okay? Now, it's assumed that all the Marines will make the drop because computer guidance systems on the pod move the pod a little bit left or right to avoid all kinds of anti-aircraft fire that the skinnies have and can't handle it, quite honestly. And that also accounts for of the scatter in the first place. Now, you would think it would be just like paratroops in World War II, right? Well, it's not. And they do something to try to make the process a little bit more efficient. And it's interesting how they explain it. See, the thing is, you're going to use a drift diagram, okay? And you're going to use one die to say what direction they're going to go and how many hexes they move, okay? So it seems kind of weird, it's in a way, it's like, okay, if you roll a 6, it's going to go straight out 6 hexes. You roll 1, you're not only going to go only 1 hex, but you're going to go right directly back. But there's something you do before you roll for all these guys. You're rolling to see which ways the ships were traveling. Now, you would think at first, wait a minute, don't we already know which way the ships are traveling? We got 4 guys going straight up and down, and you got 2 ships up there going this way and this way. Well, that's not so. They are actually all going in the same direction, The ship is just deciding to shoot them out the tubes at different times, again, to avoid anti aircraft fire. It's all computer generated. Okay. So, again, here we go. We got the drift diagram here. And what we do is we would roll on the scatter diagram down below right there. And you would roll a die. And let's say you roll a one, you just keep the drift diagram as it is. And then you'd roll for every troop. But if you rolled a four, as it would say on the scatter diagram, then all you would have to do is just totally point the scatter diagram in the opposite direction and then roll. And the whole point is, again, to keep people honest, so they don't try to say, okay, well, I know that the um, drift diagram is like this. So if I move all my guys all the way down, they'll never fly off the board, because you do lose your troops if you fly off the board. So I guess it's to keep people honest in that regard. As my drift happened, I only lost one guy throughout the whole thing. So basically, let's take a look at what happened with my drift. Wham! That's what it looked like afterward, and that's pretty good. That's pretty good randomization. It's pretty nice. Again, this game got really chaotic really fast. So let's go into it. Let's get to turn one. Now, I found out early on that spreading the skinny's forces out thin, no pun intended, were a really bad idea. The main reason is because there's just so many forces of the Marines. Before, in scenario one, when they were trying to find these installations, there was only a squad that the skinnies had to contend with. Now they got an entire platoon. They're all over the dang map. Okay. And when you add the idea that in scenario two, we got introduced to the Marines being able to do their extended jump, which means they could move, attack, and then move half their movement again, much like Ogre GEVs from Steve Jackson games, right? Basically, that makes them very maneuverable. They can get anywhere they wanted to in the game. So there's no reason to spread them out. But another thing about spreading them out is the fact that the heavy weaponry kind of suffered, because, yeah, I was overlapping a little bit. I wanted to make sure that I'd have that four howitzer defense thing again, Ogre GEV game there from Steve Jackson Games, where you have them overlapping a little bit, all the big guns, because they had ranges of 10 and 6, you know. The problem is there wasn't enough of that. They were still too far away, because you really want to ping. If you can't ping at the scouts and the leaders, which, that's good combat odds. They were often 3 to 4 to 1. You know, 3 to 1, 4 to 1, which means that pretty much you're doing the result you want to get your one of 25 results to win the game. But for any other Marine, it's only 2 for 1, and then you don't really want to roll that, because that's still, you can stun them, but you only got 12 turns. You want to take care of them. It'd be better just to say, bam, you're getting hit with 4 to 1, you're going down. That would be the way to go. And I lessened my chances of that drastically having it set up the way. So what happened on turn one? Well, basically, what the Marines wanted to do, my idea was, again, being scared of the heavy weaponry, being able to cut through the entire hex if Marines stacked, in one hex. So I had them stayed spread out, and I let the Marines use their delayed proximity fuses where they can technically attack when moving. They just run over, jet over an area, drop a mine, whoop, they're gone, and then boom, it goes off. Okay, and I tried to make that happen. The problem is a lot of those don't go off very strongly, and they ended up disrupting a lot of these heavy weapons, not killing it. All right, and that happened a lot to a lot of those guys up there. So they got lucky that they didn't get their turn to attack. But it kept me honest enough that I had my Marines spread out, because even before they went to the installations, because they want to get in there to take care of the workers or the regular warriors, and then destroy the installation. But that's what happened on turn one. Maybe there was one heavy wounded Marine, but other than that, they took very little casualties, a few stuns. But actually, there was a lot of stuns all the way around. The most thing that got destroyed were installations right off the bat, because they were just easy pickings for the Marines' movement. So let's go to turn two. Now, one thing I learned by the end of turn two is that the Marines really got a logistic problem just trying to keep track of who's moved and who's fired. I'm speaking as this as a player. Has nothing to do with their record control sheet and the keeping control of their special weapons and equipment like their heavy rocket launchers and their drop weapons and stuff like that. It has nothing to do with that. It just everything's intermixed. All the squads are intermixed with each other. They're all over the place, and just seeing who's where, and especially if you want to combine forces to attack something, that can throw everything off because you don't have to be from the same squad to attack something. So if you do any combined attacks, now you got to remember that that one guy's moved, and I guarantee you, I screwed that up along the way. Nothing drastic, I don't think, but I definitely did. Now, as far as this turn goes, it really seemed like the humanoids, the skinnies, were really getting their fair share in. Unlike my other battles, mainly because of those heavy weapons. As you could see in the upper right hand corner there, the mid upper right, there's a couple of heavy results, wounded in action results and killed in action results, and one on the bottom left there. And basically, the skinnies only need 2 to 3 of those a turn. And with 12 turns, and they're going to actually just they'll take care of business because they need again 25 of them to win. If I would have actually combined them a little bit closer, I wonder how well I would have done. I kept 2 of them or 3 of them down on the bottom left there, and that just probably wasn't the greatest move in the world. They work better in conjunction with each other. But as you could see, though, the Marines were undeterred. They're going to get their own soon enough here, and they're definitely taking care of everything all around as far as installations go. Now, I want to bring your attention to what's happening in the upper right hand corner before we move to turn three, because this is kind of important. As I mentioned before, if all the skinnies are wiped out of the spaceport and the city by the end of any turn, the Marines automatically win. So, obviously, I got some skinnies up there, right? But the maneuverable Marines made it in deep into the city because even though the city hexes cost them 3 movement points to enter each one, yeah, the Marines, they're pretty dang maneuverable and they get through pretty good. But the skinnies do have 2 aces up their sleeve here. The first is any combat in a city hex, unless you're one of the bugs, they suffer a -1 on the die roll. Okay, and that makes an even a 2 to 1 combat odds ratio survivable, maybe even for a worker. All right, so what ends up happening is you really got to commit forces to get in there. And of course, that's another thing that's taking you away from all the other action that's going on. So it's something to consider. So let's look at turn three and see what happens. Bam. This is a little bit clearer picture. But it was we could see in the city, those 2 Marines got one disrupted result, and the other one had no problems whatsoever. And all they do is run away. And they, unlike the Marines, can waltz right through the city at a movement rate of half a movement point per hex. So they don't move all the way across the city here because, of course, you got other Marines getting ready to wait for them. But that's something to consider in your game and experiment with. Now, as we can look by the color blue everywhere, this is the end of turn three and pretty much the end of the game. The heavy weapons were not really touched. But it didn't look like they did any damage here at all. But it was at the end of turn three that all the installations were found. I guess I put even if I didn't put a dummy counter, I did that randomly so I could keep myself a little honest. But even if there was a dummy counter in the upper right left hand corner, it's already turn three, and I pretty much found everything all at once. So again, the main thing here is spreading yourself out thin in this scenario is probably not the way to go. They're not completely like I did anyway. Maybe if keeping some forces in the city and keeping some forces in the upper left-hand corner, like I did, would be a good thing. And then maybe having some others in another spot. That would be okay, but I had them really spread out. I mean, spread them out to a point. I get it, you know what I'm saying? But maybe not as spread out. Maybe 3 locations would be better than just a complete spreading out because you're not stopping these Marines from whatsoever. Nonetheless, quick and dirty. It was more time spent setting up than I did playing. I think because of the because of the drop zone rules, but that's okay. I did have a lot of fun with it nonetheless. It's good to learn these things. I'd rather have learned it by myself than face the wrath of somebody else bearing down on me, unless they were new to wargaming, in which case you always want to let them win. But anyway, guys, that is Starship Troopers 3, Scenario 3, and I'll see you next video.